How you doing? Now, my name's Owen Curran, and I was 60 years of age this year, and I was born in Allison Street in 1962. Most of my parents were from Donegal, not that unusual around the area. A very fairly happy childhood now. Looking back, I suppose there was another thing that comes into it too. In those early 60s, it was a kind of time of hope and a kind of time for working class people. It was like things were getting a bit better in general because, with a decent standard, we weren't rich. My father worked in tunnels and stuff like that. My mother worked, but then she stopped working when she had the family. But what I remember was a nice, comfortable standard of living in Allison Street. And it was like, you always remember, it was like cozy place, you could feel it was a nice place to grow up. That's what I remember. That was one of my first memories, one of the first memories I have of, and they always say that my family always say you must have a great memory. Maybe I make these things up, or maybe only I think I do, but like a few friends of my father came up one Friday night, as would often happen. And my father didn't drink, but he played the fiddle, and he was a great man for conversation. But I remember he lifted me and he put me sitting up on top of the cabinet, and I was sitting up there, I didn't know how to get down, but it was all right because he was there. But that shows you, I'm trying to show you how far back I can go with my memory, But it was, I think what happened then, we lived in Glasgow for a few years, but my father was very restless because he was the only boy in his own family. He was it was going to be his farm in Donegal, which was only a wee small farm, but he always kind of loved the place. And the thing was, he had left home young himself after the Second World War, and he worked places like hydro dams and all that. And I suppose he still, even when he left, it was always kind of his thought, well, I'll get a few pounds, I'll go back and I'll start living my home place in the farm, as so many people always try to do. Then when he met my mother, that changed a bit. Now, the thing was, they did move back, and we moved back for a year, but we didn't settle. And I understand later in life why we didn't settle, because we moved back to what was an old cottage. My mother had 5 a family. She had hot water. She had maybe a washing machine, but a way of doing washing anyway. And then all of a sudden we moved back, and the evening we moved into the house, we just got the electric light in the week before. There was one bulb hanging in the middle of the kitchen, and up in the room it was still the oil lamps. And for my mother, for any woman, it was a step back, to be honest. It was, and I think she was actually, at that stage, she was actually pregnant with another child. And my father was a dreamer, a great man, a dreamer, but she was the one who had to do the day-to-day practical stuff, So I think there was a bit of dispute over that, because my mother said he started working, but, the dream was one thing, but he realised he couldn't really survive, and he hadn't built up the farm. So he came back again to work, and she said, if you're coming back, we better go back as well. I'm not staying here on my own. And I understand that totally now, why she would do that. So we went back then, and we lived in Govanhill Street, and it was back, and we were always happy, and there was never any problem with the switch over from school that I can remember. I started school in Donegal, and then I came back and I went to Daisy Street School, as they called it then, And I think one of the things was, most of the people in the class, his parents were Irish, and I know that was that generation, but I would say there was at least 3/4 of what I remember were Irish, and mostly Donegal, at least one parent, because I remember the people I went to school with, Sweeney, McBride, McGady, it was like Gallagher. You just knew that's the way it was, And the funny thing is, and I don't think people understand this about immigrants. That was our community. We also knew that there was a wider community that we often mixed in. We weren't in a ghetto, or we didn't. That's not how we see it. And in retrospect, we didn't see it like that, because there was the wider community out there that you actually had friends. My brother, his 2 best friends were from the Italian community. It wasn't a ghetto. It wasn't a narrow looking place, but it was, you were Irish, and you're quite happy to be that, to be honest, And I used to remember classmates coming in, and both their parents were Irish speakers, and the next morning, I'm talking about when we were 5, 6, 7, they would still be kind of speaking Gaelic in the morning because it's they still had their home thing, and then they'll come back to English then, and it was kind of interesting because these were real, like if you met them in other circumstances, you said they were real Glasgow people, but and I just think that's the whole language stuff and the whole the culture. It's kind of interesting, but these things I think survive parallel with the wider Glasgow life. The other thing was a big change, and I do remember this from my school days, was Ireland and the Troubles in the North. We had a teacher called Miss McInerney. She was from Armagh, and I'm talking about when we're still in Daisy Street, so we're probably 6, 7 around. We're probably about 6 or 7, but and she was a strict teacher, she was a real able person, But remember one moment came when she was in tears, in front of the children in class, and she was probably I thought she was no woman. She probably in her 30s, at the very oldest. But she started telling us that her father and her 2 brothers were lifted in what was then, as we know now, internment. But the thing was, at the time, they didn't know what the outcome of that was going to be. All she knew, and you think of communications between the here and there at that time, all she knew from her mother was they landed and they took them away, and the mother didn't even know, and she was going through her back at work the next day wondering what's going to outcome of this going to be, and it was really it was kind of the first for us at our age, our first effect of what we realised how the Troubles could affect people, and what it was about. And as I say, in retrospect, it was internment, and a lot of those people were released without charge. But at the time, they didn't know that, and their families certainly didn't know what the outcome going to be, I would say I was about 6 or 7, 7, I'd be around that, because I know I was still in primary, I was still in low class, and there was, and I remember my father saying that time, because he was worried too, because he knew a lot of things about politics, and that he knew the way the world worked. But a workmate of his who had older children from the same background as ourselves, I'm talking about teenagers, 17, 18, when the Trouble started, he was telling my father that he was very worried because they got really radicalised, that they really, so you can see the effects that had on ordinary people, ordinary working people, and that's the point I would take out of that. Now, okay, I'm looking back at this now, but I'm not. But I remember then I used to draw. That's just I was actually quite a good drawer. It's a thing I used to do in class. But I used to draw. If I drew, let's say, a sailing ship, I would put a tricolour on the sailing ship, and things like this. We just sort of nearly made colours to the mast, so to speak. But I remember the teacher telling me, listen, no, why do you keep doing that? This is Ireland don't have a navy, I don't really care, but more or less saying no. And I think I remember showing it to the head teacher, and they said, listen, this is I think they've been all right for this way. If you put the Union Jack or even the skull and crossbones, it would have been all right, but because it was the tricolour. And I just remember that there was the first time that I started to see, somebody's seen a difference here, And I thought, it's kind of when you're young, you're cute about these things. You realise, that's that's a funny thing to be pulling me up about, And it's just that was, I suppose, around the time, obviously things were changing. That was the early 70s. Things were changing a lot for Irish people in Britain, as we know. The Burning of 6 killed for 4. That would be, that would be an outcome, a severe outcome of the attitude, and the Prevention of Terrorism Act, stuff like that. But there was definitely a coldness, within the Irish community that hadn't been there previously. So I realise that now, looking back in my life, and I know there was a lot of that sort of undercurrent of that was never maybe spoke out, was directly. Now, I do remember my mother, she was formidable when she had to be. But I remember some mention in a shop about something she went in for and wasn't there, the staff sort of started mocking her a bit, you know, because they thought, like, you know, this woman's from the bogs. What would she know about, like, what's good quality furniture or whatever it was? But she held to them, like, and she didn't let them, you know, like she no, they weren't going to get away with this, or, you know, this woman knows she's a, no, she's, what would she know? She was, maybe she was lying a straw last year or something, you know. But she didn't know, but there was a certain attitude, you know, that, you know, more or less know your place, you know. And sure, like, that's just far too high quality stuff. Why would you be thinking there was anything wrong with it? You know, who you. So, no, you could tell that, you know, but I always remember the way my mother handled it. It was like no bother to, you know, it was, but I also think that there'll be other people that maybe wouldn't be as able to handle these things. And then, you know yourself, when you put down, it can fester in you, like, you know, it can change in the way, you know, your whole psychological way that, you know, you perform in life, you know, just because, you know, you can carry these things, you know. So, but the other thing, you know, is interesting, like, as I say, as a young fella, you know, my father's old neighbours would come up at times, like, and they would be speaking in Gaelic, and they would be, you know, talking. And it was like, you know, it was like an old raking house, and even though it was in the middle of, you know, Friday night on Allison Street and that, you know, it didn't seem like it, you know, it was just a kind of dumb thing, you know. And it's like, you know, when you'd hear about people, you know, and then Donegal, or they used to go out raking, well, I would say, well, I knew that because they used to do it here too, you know, in Glasgow, you know, because that was part of their culture, around and gather in houses and have a bit of song and a bit of music and drink. My father didn't drink, but he didn't mind other people having a drink at the house, you know. So, and I remember too, I know I'm kind of jumping forward, but it's just, you know, when I'm on the subject of music and drink and stuff like that, I remember, like, one of my cousins got married, and he would be a bit older, obviously older than us, but, like, he was only young when they got married, him and the wife, but my father allowed him to have the reception in his house, you know. Like, I don't even know why, but that was, but there was a great party in the house, and I often think about neighbours. The neighbours didn't seem to bother. Maybe they told them, maybe they were happy enough to give them, like, a day of, you know, but they had the wedding reception in the house anyway, like, and I remember, like, even my old aunts, you know, like, they had the record player on, like, you know, it was all like, you know, well, you come to the bower, and it was all this, you know, like, you know, it was, I think the Clancy brothers had a lot to do with it, you know, but, like, it was all rebel music, like, all day and all night, like, and you think, I often think, how did the neighbours, they obviously went around the neighbours and says, listen, we're having a wedding, you know, like, you're invited, or, you know, do you mind if we, like, because there must have been wild noise, and must have been wild, like, a real holy, you know. So it's kind of, you know, it's kind of, you know, there's obviously a bit of tolerance there, because I'm sure there's people on the stair that weren't all, like, from that background, you know. So it's kind of, I suppose that's back to the working class neighbourliness again, Paula, you know, that, you know, there was that kind of, you know, there was community, sense of community in it, like, you know. We moved back to Donegal when, I remember the first time we moved back, I think that was that first time I talked about, it was 5. I moved back then, and we stayed a year, I think, at the very most. And my mother obviously gave my father the ultimatum, and then we came back then, like, and we stayed there, and for another, till I was 10, another 5 years. And then we moved back then, and we stayed longer, but the thing was immigration, which was coming up for us all. And I remember, and it seemed a long time, but looking back, it was only a few years. I remember being back in, I remember I went away again when I was 18. My father took me away working. And I remember, like, as I say, it was kind of ironic. I said to him in one of the emails, like, the first place you landed back was actually the street you were born in. We're down in the Unique in Allison Street. You know, we came back on the boat, and we're going to stay with my aunt, but he didn't want my aunt to be making us dinner. He said, we'll go down and get a good feed here, and then we'll go, you know, blah, 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 you know. So, like, I was kind of interesting, because, like, it was, like, I wasn't that long away from Glasgow altogether, and then I was back. And, like, because when you're young and you know, you're tuned in, like, it was like, okay, I was away for about 8 years at the most, but it was like you're away for about 8 days, you know. You knew all the streets, you knew everything was, and, like, you know, things didn't seem to change as much in those years. Everything was there the way it was when you left it, you know. So it's kind of interesting enough, you know, even though, like, the funny thing is, people always say to me about been Scottish or Irish. Well, even when I was in Glasgow, I was Irish. That didn't change. That people don't understand that. I was never classed myself as being like a Scotsman or whatever. I mean, I knew I was Irish. That's what it was. So it didn't change. It didn't matter where I was living. So but then I went away walking up on way up on a place called Turness, way up on the east coast of Scotland. I stayed up there for a good number of years, and then I worked a lot of places on the east coast, up different bigger jobs, as I say. But my father died then. He took a brain hemorrhage. He was home. He was going to stay home for a wee while. That was only 2 years after I came over, but 3 years, whatever it was. He was going to try and stay at home. He was 62 at that stage. He was still a young, fit man, but that was his last kind of chance of staying home. But unfortunately, it never worked out for him. He had a brain hemorrhage and he died a few months later. And I remember once again, things that are new to you. And it's kind of interesting because my cousin said, she told me that my father was dying, which is I've booked a flight from Glasgow Airport to Derry. And the first time I was ever on a plane, it was only, I think it was 19, but it was new to me. But you're not that. But I went down to Glasgow Airport and in fair play to she had everything booked. But and I didn't know if that was normal at the time. But then once you checked in, I seen they give you the screen card. It wasn't the time to fill in and one of the things was no reason for travelling. Well, that's just no funeral. Told the truth. The next thing, these two, you give the car back to the people that was working there. The next thing, these two, obviously two plainclothes policemen, they came down. I was sitting down. No, will you be waiting for the plane? Says could we have a word? Well, yeah, no, it's this. They had the green card there and started asking about who I was, where I was going, whose funeral I was going to. So this is you think about it, this is a my father's dead. I'm a 19. I'm gonna talk about and so I just told them matter of factly they still seem to think okay, I know that was the early 80s. There were a lot of things going on, fair enough, but that was all right. Look, I just took it as normal, went on the plane. But the one thing that I wasn't, and maybe it was to do, maybe I damaged me or work or something, but this idea that you're on a plane, I didn't realize, it's good if your ears pop, and because the pressure built up in the ears, and I wasn't sure what was happening. No, I didn't know to chew a sweet or the way that people do now. And I remember my ears got really sore, got really deaf, because I was talking to a person beside me who was actually going to another funeral with her family. They were going to the Rosses, and I was thinking, they said she was a person with my own age. She says, we've got a minibus hired. And I'm thinking, oh, I could get a lift for them. I'll pay my way. But anyway, cut a long story short, then this, the deafness came on me and whatever. And when I got out, of course, when I was out in Derry, everybody's coming out through. And next thing, there's another two policemen calling me into this, calling me aside, and I couldn't even hear what they were saying. I was deaf for the pressures built up. And they were saying, and I was saying, look, I can't even hear you. I don't even know what you're saying. And I don't know if they thought that was you were trying to be smart or whatever. But I answered the best I could. But to cut a long story short, by the time I came out of the airport, all the transport minibuses to Donegal were gone. And I was standing there no, but it's just it's I put that down as everyday life. But I mean, one of the policemen did say, look, I'm really sorry, but no, in all fairness, one of them had a wee bit of but the rest of them are standing out there and you're thinking, how do I get from here to home now? And as I say, my plan was to ask these people who were going to the Rosses, they were going, not their fault. So that I got a taxi then from the Derry airport. If I'll get one to Letterkenny, at least I'm down across the border. But that wasn't easy got. A lot of them taxi drivers didn't want to cross the border. Then one fella did. He says, "Well, he said, I need to go home first." And obviously he went home. He might have even took something with him, but he certainly told people where he was going. So that's the kind of time you're in. He's probably looking at this young, probably this stage of scruffy looking young fella that just seemed to land from nowhere. And I cannot. But was that, how would say it's a bit of dread, a bit of suspicion all the time. but the thing was, people would say to me, you think, I was very happy in Glasgow. Well, like I like the kind of post looking back. I like the call. Like probably I was, of course I was from there too. Probably had some kind of effect, And like I like music. I like I like the nightlife. I like going to watch the football. There were a lot going on that for a young man, of my age or young person, that was important. Like yet, like and that was there was a great buzz about, like among the kind of like you were well respected among the kind of community just for being your Irish, but people seem to kind of like, to be honest. And I found it a very good place to live. Even another thing too, accommodation was quite easy got, and like it wasn't that dear for what you would have. I think it'd be a lot harder now to get the same thing, And it was no, they were good years, I suppose it's interesting because the interlinking of Donegal and Glasgow, and I think as a child we never seen really the difference in it, because you spent a lot of time. Even my classmates would be over on holiday a lot anyway. Like, they knew they had the same. They didn't move over and back to try and live as much as we did, but some of them eventually did. But most of them still went over and back, and some of them even, and I know some of them even later in their life settled back into maybe their granny's home place or whatever, So that link is, I think, is very strong yet, to be quite honest,